Okay, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in again. This is part two of the codependency interview with my
Hey
boyfriend.
guys.
So, we were kind of touching on your childhood and just all the trauma and stuff that happened back then. Um, so, there was one person in your life that you were telling me about that was a male figure you could kind of look up to. Can you kind of talk about him?
Yeah, so he is my uncle. Um, Interesting thing is he's not my biological blood related family member, but he was always there growing up. He was almost like the actual dad that I had. So I would turn to him, and still to this very day, I still keep in contact with this individual. But for a sense of normality, I think that he was the closest thing that I had to an actual, parent or father figure at that point. So,
Well, can you kind of talk about, you know, what kind of things would he do that your father didn't do? And can you kind of go over your relationship back then as to now with him?
yeah. So the really interesting thing was I remember being a kid and, we're going out on trips together. So whether that's going to the hardware store, or going out with my sisters and mom as a kid, we would go to this botanical kind of like garden place in our city.
Mm-hmm.
It's still there to this day. We
Yeah.
went there a few times, but I remember being there as a kid and we're taking like family photos. Dad was never there and he never made the attempts to. So I don't know if my dad was just in his own shell, like where he was just resentful of everything in his life and just in his darkest final hours, days, doing whatever it
Yeah.
is, being a moper. I don't know, but he never made an effort. And it was always this individual who made the effort to, take me out fishing, do different things. And it was great for me because you gravitate towards people, not necessarily your parents, could be siblings, whatever the case is, uncles,
That are
or
kind to you, you know.
or cousins or whatever the
Yeah.
case is, and that are kind, and you just naturally as a kid gravitate towards these individuals because there's a positive kind of vibe, and you just naturally know. So yeah, that was one person who I think was there for me, especially when times got rough and the different dysfunctional family tumultuous kind of type things that would happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I think kind of grown up now, uh, once I got a little bit older, and then ultimately to the point where, I got out of my household situation from my mother and her guy by moving in with this person that I called uncle. I think at that point it was pros and cons because I never had any sort of boundaries. I lived my life up until that moment by doing whatever my mother said, and I didn't have any rules. I could have done anything that I wanted,
Mm-hmm.
but I wasn't out there, creating some sort of like chaos or anything. I was very reserved and just played video games nonstop. I didn't really have any sort of ambition or drive to like, because I never got a chance to really find myself. But once I moved in with him, I was probably a freshman in college. I remember having no boundaries, so I could pretty much do whatever I want. So it was just a continuation of what I was doing growing up, just now in a new place without any rules or restrictions at all. Um, then we met.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's when reality kind of hit me that, I wanted to, do something on my own. So being independent from those individuals, including him, it was a tough but kind of like a developing kind of part in my life where I knew I had to be independent. Didn't know how quite to do that. Unfortunately, you saw the worst of that. But now it's kind of where I feel happy and confident in who I am. And I do also see him as being a very codependent person. For one, having to endure through all the tumultuousness of my parents and their divorce, still sticking by my mother and then still putting up to this very day by being associated to those individuals.
He still hangs out with your mom and stepdad, right?
Yeah, so keep in mind, this guy, this stepdad person, he would mentally, verbally, physically, abuse my mom. There were many times where the legal law police department would get involved, and my sisters would show up, and so would my uncle. My dad was nowhere to be found. He didn't care, so he wasn't present to take me away from that situation.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I truly believe that my uncle is super codependent because who knows what kind of upbringing he had or lack of or whatever the scenario is. I don't know that much about them, or interestingly, my parents. I don't know much about their background.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's almost like a hush-hush thing where they never really divulged that too much. But I see all the qualities and things in him that I don't want to be as I'm getting older, as I want to have my own family, and the type of friends that I possibly would want. I don't view those qualities in him. When I was younger, he was the greatest person in the world. And now it's kind of like I just don't see him in pretty much the same light.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting you say that because I felt the same way about my mom too. I felt like she was like, and I think it's because people who are kind to us in the ways that, is different from when our actual abusers are treating us like crap. It's like, of course you're going to gravitate, like you said, towards that kindness and towards someone that is going to be more patient with you and show you that kind of love that you're needing at the time as a child. But in reality, they're being very codependent. And the fact is, it is something where they could have taken you out of the situation. They were the adults and they chose not to.
True.
Yeah.
But
that's another topic for another video. So yeah, but basically, can you tell me about friends and other relationships outside of ours that you've had kind of as a codependent person? What are some things you've noticed over time?
Yeah. Before we get on to that, there's this really great book that I was kind of reading on.
Oh, right.
So the title of the book is Conquering Shame and Codependency, 8 Steps to Freeing the True You by Darlene Lancer. And you probably may have heard about this book before through other, individuals and sources. But it has a lot of great exercises in there where you can kind of gauge, to see where you're at in your progress through this as you're reading through it. And there's even, I think in chapter 2, it talks about shame and identity. And it kind of goes into the whole parenting, different methods and styles that kind of plays into kind of the stuff that we're discussing. So it's very insightful. And hopefully it can kind of give you more perspective into maybe why things happen in your upbringing and your parents and who they are and how it shaped you, and kind of give you more perspective and in-depth look into, why things are the way they are, so, but just want to mention that before I forget.
Yeah, you've got some pretty good books here that we'll kind of go over before the end of, this interview. And because, there's so many good things out there on codependency. There's so many good books and resources and YouTube channels even that are just really good at, everyone responds differently to different things. So if you're not a reader, maybe, a YouTube channel would be better to listen to. Or, if you don't have time to listen to like a podcast type of a thing, maybe reading is your thing. It's just really up to you. Maybe you would do better in a support group. There's plenty of support groups online, like Facebook. If you want to go to a physical place, there's even, was it Codependency?
Yeah,
Anonymous?
There's different organizations, and you don't physically have to be there. There's even, I think...
like a Skype thing online.
Kind of like, I don't think it's a webinar, but kind of like online meetings that you can kind of attend, different times and schedules throughout the year that you can kind of, listen into. And, The one thing I'll say is if something doesn't work or if you're just not feeling it, just don't give up. Just understand maybe that's not the best source and just find something else. If the book you're reading or you're looking into just isn't working, see if there's something else if you want to give that a try. I personally haven't read a book in years. So that's something you wouldn't see me doing, but the books that I did kind of check out, it really grasped my attention. So it's really interesting stuff. At least it gave me a kind of perspective into myself, and I can kind of now understand, like, oh, okay, this is what they're referring to, and I kind of get it now. So it's good source materials that you can kind of get yourself into. So.
And just a quick kind of resource, if you do want to check out the Codependency Anonymous website and kind of look in to see if I'm sure there's chapters and stuff and groups and all that good stuff, all the information on their website is coda.org. So just to kind of put that out there, you can just Google Codependency Anonymous as well. But yeah, so that's a good resource. And I kind of wanted to touch before we talk about like your relationships with other people and friendships and stuff like that, just on your experience, because I know we kind of had a talk about, kind of you wanting to do more for yourself and kind of you basically went to, I think it was it's not Alcoholics Anonymous, Child of Alcoholic.
Yeah, so it was Al-Anon.
Okay.
So not necessarily the.
So you're not an alcoholic, but your father is.
Right. And
children or family members of alcoholics.
Right.
Okay.
And this support group was for those individuals who have someone who was an alcoholic, and if it affected your life in some way or another and you just need a support group, you can definitely seek these out in your local, cities, communities, and towns. They're everywhere. And for a lot of individuals, they still attend it from what I heard when I went. They've been part of the organization or group, I should say, for many years, and if it works for them, great. For myself, at that time, I was trying to come to terms with how can I keep a relationship with my father, who's a narcissist and who's an alcoholic, because I just could never get to him. I could never connect with him. And I thought that perhaps by going to this, I could kind of rekindle that relationship and kind of, figure out if there's a way I can kind of work him into, my inner circle where I could be close with one of my parents, and understanding that, maybe this will kind of have other people that were in similar scenarios that I could kind of get advice and guidance from. Unfortunately for myself, and not saying it hasn't helped others, it just wasn't for me, but I was thankful of the time that I did go, but it did open up more avenue into other things that I didn't realize at that time, like codependency, and that kind of helped me to kind of gear into what I'm trying to figure out in myself and understand better with my parents and those around me. So
and I think it's interesting because I always say, even if what you're looking at currently isn't for you, it can open up a different door or avenue to something that, could help you.
Yeah.
It's just you've just got to try something. You can't just give up. And I think it can be difficult enough as it is being a survivor or a target of abuse, but, and it's hard because we get triggered. Because most of us have CPTSD. So we get triggered and it's just, we don't want to deal with it. We want to escape, or we just think there's nothing wrong with us. And every and any excuse we can do to not be re-traumatized, I think, but honestly, you've got to do the work, and that's the only way, things will get done. So anyway, I'm sorry, I'm getting way off topic here. So back to the interview.
Yeah, so the question was basically, how did other people, friends, and in my social kind of network, how did I interact with them, or what was the dynamic like with those people?
Right. What kind of people did you attract
Yeah,
in your life?
so I think it was individuals that honestly could step over me, and that's
Yeah.
the reality of it. Growing up, you have friends, and people that you believe were your best friends, but in reality, they weren't the most healthiest for you.
Yeah.
So I remember having one specific best friend that we grew up, from childhood into adulthood. Of course, you're always sticking up for your best friend, and they can do no wrong. You guys were always into things together, or even if you have difference, you're more understandable. You're more compassionate.
Right.
And from what I actually realized was things just naturally, before understanding about codependency and all these different terminologies and understanding myself, I just naturally grew apart from this individual. And I think that something within me, it just naturally happened.
Right. Yeah.
You just realize maybe they're not the type of person that you want to be around with, or whatever the case is. It just played out that way. But some of the examples were, when you really needed someone, this person can always turn to you. But when you needed them, they were nowhere to be found.
Oh.
Or they would withhold certain feelings or affections, or it wasn't mutual. It wasn't reciprocated,
Right.
So it was almost forced whenever that was the case. So they would throw it back in your face, like, hey, remember that time I did this, or you owed me this and that. It shouldn't. Whereas if they were truly your best friend, or even friend who's compassionate or considerate, it's like, hey, don't worry about it. Are you okay? What's going on? It was never like that with me and this individual. Instead, it was this weird competitive edge or nature, like, I'm better than you, or if it's something that you messed up, I'm going to continuously say it over and over, almost like in some weird way, like they had their own issues, obviously, that was going on. Whatever that was, I don't know, but it was almost like a mistrust, and you realize that now, like, hey, this person probably wasn't the greatest person that I should have called my best friend.
Yeah.
You didn't know that as kids, but that kind of behavior from them kind of gets nurtured into shaping into who they are. And yeah, so I'm not friends with this individual anymore.
Yeah.
But I remember, when we didn't communicate, they were like, hey, is it something I did? You're my best friend, blah, blah, blah. I'm willing to even go out of my way and say I'm sorry a million times, just as long as you give me, that chance. But then it was weird and awkward, because I kind of realized that, they probably needed a punching bag or something, they didn't have that anymore.
Yeah.
So, which was their attempts into trying to get you back.
Kind of like hoovering a little bit.
Yeah.
So if you don't know what hoovering is, it is a technique that a lot of abusers or narcissists will use to try to hoover you back, like a vacuum cleaner, to suck you back up into their little nest of ickiness. And from what it sounds like to me, I think that this person is definitely an overt narcissistic type of a person.
They truly believe that everyone loves them, that they changed the world, and that people are doing it, or similar things or tendencies or whatever, because of them. It's kind of weird, but in some ways comical. Like, I remember this individual got a tattoo. Now, keep in mind, this is probably late 90s, early 2000s, so whatever was popular at that time, tribal tattoos, whatever the case was. They got a tattoo, and I remember them saying, I showed it off, to my colleagues, and they admired it, and in fact, some of them were going to get tattoos of themselves because of me.
Yeah.
It sounds like a joke when someone says that, but to them, they were serious. They were really feeling this way. And it was all those cues and signs that, back then when they said it, I was just like, okay, whatever, that's just you being you. But they truly believe that, like this person was. And not saying everyone's like them, but this one specific individual believed that they were, you know,
So special, and everyone just kind of wanted to be them in a way.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like that one clip of Elon where he was having some sort of conference, and there was
Oh,
an attendee that basically,
Elon Musk, the guy
yeah,
that makes the electric cars,
Tesla
Teslas.
and everything
Okay.
else. And this guy in the audience asked him a question, but wanted that second look, probably perhaps for a submitted resume, who knows, whatever the case was, but firmly believes with a serious face, and it was so awkward, but that he was special, you know?
Well, he even said, I'm a genius like you," or
Yes.
something like that.
Yeah.
And everyone laughed, but he was, yeah, he was
Yeah.
totally serious in the
It,
clip that we're talking about.
it wasn't like, some sort of improvised kind of, joke or anything. He was serious. But anyways, this is how this individual was like. So I realized I didn't need that type of person in my life, and naturally that allowed me to kind of break free from it.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I did get involved with someone in a relationship who at first, of course, you thought everything was great.
Oh, this is a romantic relationship?
Yes.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
This is before me. Okay.
Yes. So things were great. You thought it was new, it was innocent. And slowly, as the year kind of progress on, you kind of see some, like, their true inner self kind of come out. They weren't being that genuine kind of individual to you, genuine in the sense where they reciprocated that kind of natural care for you. Instead, it became more demanding. It even got to the point of being verbally abusive. And this person always wanted something, and they just didn't care or truly love you,
Right.
the way that a good, healthy relationship should be. So during that time, I got pretty depressed, and we called things off, but I still stuck by their side. So from what I remember, they said that even though we're not involved, I still see you as my best friend, and I still want you to be there for me because
That manipulation.
we have a great friendship. They were basically using me for whatever financial services, like, hey, I'm in a jam, if you can help me out with this, or I need you to take me here and there. And I reciprocated it. I went along with it because I was like, they truly are in a bind. I need to help them. Yes, it was on me, but they took advantage of that, and I wasn't well equipped like I am now to realize these red flags. So eventually I had to break free from that individual. I think more so less about the friendship or the past, relationship that we were involved. I just wanted someone to be there, and someone who would listen to me. It's just, unfortunately, this person wasn't it. I just needed another soul to kind of communicate with and just, socialize with. And I thought this person, I can maintain this with this person, but they were very toxic. And that's where many years later, I'm, trying to break free from a lot of different, fleas from these people. But I think I'm making progress, and, at least I can realize now that there's reasons why it didn't continue, and something naturally in you kind of breaks you from them. And it had to be that way because, or else it would have been a huge mess to kind of see this play out so many years later.
Yeah. So you talk about fleas. Do you think part of the reason why you stuck with her for so long and kind of like allowed yourself to be manipulated, or I don't know if that's the right way to be. I don't want to victim shame you, but I will say, basically because of your mother being a borderline personality person.
Yeah.
Do you think you picked up fleas kind of like, oh, this is the last person on earth that and no one else is going to want me, and I have to have someone around me kind of thing?
So it could have been an unconscious kind of type of thing that happened. It's like, okay, I see how tumultuous and how awful my parents' relationships are, and whenever I get into your relationship, that's not going to happen to me. In fact, I'm going to do my best to make sure that relationship works. And I think with the wrong individuals or people that can take advantage of that, and you have that mindset going into it, they can take advantage of you, and you would still put up with it.
Yeah.
You know? And I think that's what I did. I was like, even though this relationship was tough or rough, or it's not going the way I want it to be, whether it was romantically involved or even in friendship, I stuck with them because I was like, hey, I can definitely get this to work. I can make this right, you know. But I think that's a combination of seeing that in my mother and even the individual that I called my uncle, because he stuck around them to help them and help us throughout the years, you know. And people take advantage of him, you know. And I think that I unconsciously put myself in that scenario, and I didn't remove myself from it. In doing so, I, you know, withheld a lot of information, or I kind of became more reserved. I was in my own world trying to make the situation right when it can never be right, because the people, they were just wrong, you know? So.
Yeah. It's kind of like, you know, you're being manipulated and told that everything is your fault. Obviously, you know, it's not all your fault. There's always two sides to the story. And, you know, while, yes, she was manipulating you, you were allowing this to happen.
Exactly. I was in denial. You know, I felt that this could have worked, you know. And perhaps, you know, through friendship, you know, maybe once we get past whatever obstacle was, maybe it could be romantic again. Who knows? You know?
That
There's
kind
a
of
lot
wishful thinking.
Right. But the thing is, when it's that bad, and you know the cues, you know, when something is happening, you need to get yourself out of that situation. And thankfully, that was the case. So, you know, fun stuff.
Yeah, very. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end this part here, and we're going to go to a part 3, because really what I want to touch on is video game addiction.
Yes. That thing.
So we'll be back with a part 3. Thank you so much for listening to this. Here we go.
Thanks, guys.